She was the daughter of a king, the sister of a king, and the wife of a king. She was also the first reigning Queen of England and Ireland, and Queen Consort of Spain. She was a mentally strong woman with an unstoppable will. Yet, she was forgotten in history, remembered only for her persecution of Protestants, sending nearly 300 people to the stake. This atrocity earned her the nickname Bloody Mary, which even inspired the name of a famous cocktail still enjoyed today. In this video, we will travel back to the 16th century, entering the court of Henry VIII, to learn more about the life of Mary Tudor. If you're already enjoying the video, give it a like, comment your thoughts, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to help us grow and continue bringing you fascinating stories like this one. Mary Tudor was born on February 18, 1516, in London, England. She was the daughter of King Henry VIII and his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Her birth was a great disappointment simply because she was a girl. The king desperately wanted a male heir to continue his dynasty and was absolutely obsessed with it. Her mother had several miscarriages, and the children who were born did not survive beyond 3 months. As a result, Mary was the only surviving child of the couple. Mary's childhood was a happy one. Her parents loved each other and lived in complete harmony despite the lack of a male heir. The princess was adored and cherished by all. Her father adored her and was very proud of her for being so obedient and intelligent. Her mother loved her unconditionally and gave her an excellent education with the best scholars of the time. Mary learned several languages, singing, and was also an excellent embroiderer. Additionally, she was educated to become an excellent wife, to obey a future husband, and to be a queen consort. As was customary at the time, Henry VIII began seeking a suitor for his daughter. When she was still a child, she was betrothed to Francis, the Dauphin of France, but after 2 years of negotiations, the engagement was annulled. Later, her father arranged another engagement, this time with Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire. Mary was growing up and was very intelligent, somewhat reserved, and deeply religious. As a princess, she had her own residence and a small court at Ludlow Castle. She was highly regarded at the English court, and many called her Princess of Wales, although she did not officially hold that title. However, despite her excellent education, the arranged marriage to her cousin Charles V never materialized. When Mary was a teenager, political alliances shifted, and Charles was advised to marry another princess, which deeply affected her. Mary became very sad, and from that point on, things only worsened. In 1527, her father publicly announced his intention to divorce her mother. The Catholic Church did not permit such an act, but Henry VIII had fallen in love with Anne Boleyn, a young lady-in-waiting to the Queen, who refused to sleep with him unless they were married. The king already wanted to rid himself of Queen Catherine, believing she could no longer give him a male heir. This led to a confrontation between the king and the papacy, creating further issues, as Queen Catherine was the aunt of Emperor Charles V, who not only ruled half the world but was also a devout Catholic opposed to the divorce. Mary supported her mother and refused to accept the divorce, which caused her significant problems. She was confined and constantly watched, unable to have contact with the outside world. However, she still maintained her small court, and despite the king's orders, they remained loyal to Catherine, addressing her as queen until the end of her life. Eventually, the king broke all ties with the Catholic Church, secretly married Anne Boleyn, and later managed to annul his marriage to Catherine, stripping her of all her titles and possessions, which were given to Anne Boleyn. Catherine was only allowed to retain the title of Dowager Princess of Wales, as she had been the wife of the king's elder brother, Arthur, who had died months after their marriage. Henry VIII proclaimed himself the head of the new Church of England, and those who refused to accept this were imprisoned, with some even executed. However, Mary stood firm, remaining loyal to Catholicism and defending her mother, despite being deprived of the dignities fitting her position. Her confinement only worsened under the king's orders, as she was moved several times to increasingly humble locations. She was also forbidden from communicating with her mother, though, thanks to loyal servants, they managed to secretly exchange letters. In 1533, Elizabeth, Mary's half-sister, was born as a result of her father's marriage to Anne Boleyn. Henry dissolved Mary's court, removed her from the line of succession, and stripped her of all titles and possessions, which were transferred to Elizabeth. Mary was now to be addressed only as Lady Mary and was sent to live with her half-sister to serve as her lady-in-waiting. The year 1536 was particularly painful for Mary. Her mother passed away, and she was not allowed to attend the funeral. Her betrothed, Francis, the Dauphin of France, with whom her engagement had been renewed, also died. Mary was left with no titles, no suitors, and her father entirely ignored her, not even caring to arrange another match for her. That same year, Queen Anne Boleyn was executed on the orders of her husband, and soon after, Elizabeth followed Mary's fate, being stripped of all titles and removed from the line of succession, just 2 weeks after her mother's death. Henry married his third wife, Jane Seymour, which brought some peace to Mary, as the new queen was kind and caring, attempting to reconcile the king with both of his daughters. In 1537, while gravely ill, Jane finally gave the king the male heir he so longed for, but tragically, she died 2 weeks after childbirth. Mary stayed by her side throughout and showed great affection for her younger brother, Edward, during the funeral. These actions led to Henry granting Mary her own household once again. In 1543, Henry married again, this time to Catherine Parr, his sixth and final wife. Mary quickly established a good relationship with her new stepmother, and thanks to the new queen, both Mary and Elizabeth were restored to the line of succession behind their younger brother. In 1547, Henry died, and Edward was crowned as Edward VI of England, with his uncle, Edward Seymour, serving as regent. Mary had a cordial relationship with her siblings, but after their father's death, this relationship cooled. Mary disapproved of Catherine Parr's swift remarriage and of Elizabeth, a Protestant, moving in with them. Her relationship with Edward also deteriorated, as his uncle, a Protestant, influenced him greatly. Mary distanced herself from Edward's court, staying in her home and continuing to hold Catholic Mass daily, despite her brother's prohibition. In 1549, Edward Seymour was imprisoned, and John Dudley, Duke of Northumberland, took over as regent. In 1553, the young King Edward fell gravely ill with tuberculosis and feared for his life. Dudley convinced him to alter his will so that his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, would inherit the crown, excluding Mary from the line of succession due to her Catholic faith. That same year, Edward died, and Mary had to endure another humiliation when Jane Grey was proclaimed the new Queen of England. However, Jane's reign lasted only 9 days, as the English people rose in support of Mary, who ascended the throne with popular and noble backing. Jane Grey, Dudley, and his sons were tried for high treason. Dudley was executed about a month after Mary's accession. Jane was almost spared execution, as she was seen merely as a pawn, but another rebellion involving her family sealed her fate. Early in Mary's reign, in February 1554, Jane and her husband were executed. On July 19, 1553, Mary was officially proclaimed Queen of England. One of her first measures was to restore Catholicism and reinstate the Pope as the leader of the Church of England, abolishing the Protestant reforms initiated by her father and brother. In the early days of her reign, Catholicism was peacefully re-established. Another key step was declaring her parents' marriage valid, which annulled all of her father's subsequent marriages and declared her siblings illegitimate. Mary also laid the groundwork for financial reforms and encouraged naval exploration and expansion. Shortly after her coronation, Mary received a marriage proposal from Philip II of Spain, son of Emperor Charles V. Mary immediately accepted, but this caused a drop in her popularity. The English people did not want a foreign consort. Although Mary fell in love with Philip, the feeling was not mutual, as Philip made it clear that their marriage was purely political. He did not love her and found her old and unattractive. Mary was 37 years old, which at the time was considered quite old for marriage, especially as Philip was 11 years younger. Despite this, Mary, deeply in love, proceeded with the wedding plans. However, she made it clear that Philip would not interfere in England's affairs, just as she would not meddle in Spain's. On July 25, 1554, Mary and Philip were married in Winchester Cathedral. In November 1554, everything pointed to Mary being pregnant. She had missed her period, and her belly was growing. The Queen was overjoyed, believing that she would soon fulfill her dream of becoming a mother and providing an heir for her husband. During this time, Philip persuaded her to release her sister Elizabeth, who had been imprisoned in the Tower of London due to her Protestant beliefs. He even hinted that, should Mary die in childbirth, he might marry Elizabeth. However, months passed and no child was born. Doctors concluded that Mary had never been pregnant, it had only been a case of fluid retention. By August 1555, after the heartbreak of her false pregnancy, which Mary believed to be divine punishment for having tolerated heretics in her kingdom, she initiated a brutal persecution of Protestants throughout the country, ordering them to be burned at the stake. Anything that was not based on Catholic doctrine was deemed heresy. Mary banned Protestant religious services and the use of non-Catholic books. She also sent spies to find Protestants hiding to avoid execution. By this time, Philip, her great love, had returned to Spain to ascend the throne as Philip II. Mary sank into a deep depression, marking a period of widespread executions. In a short span, Mary condemned nearly 300 people to be burned at the stake. Her harsh persecution of Protestants caused her popularity to plummet, earning her the infamous nickname Bloody Mary. It is important to note that neither her successors nor her predecessors were more lenient than she was. For instance, her father burned 81 people at the stake for their religious beliefs and is estimated to have ordered the deaths of over 50,000 people, including 2 of his wives. Her successor, Elizabeth I, also sentenced 5 people to burn at the stake and is believed to have ordered the deaths of 800 Catholics involved in the Northern Rebellion of 1569, not to mention the 200 Catholics she had hanged, drawn, and quartered for treason. Mary Tudor remained deeply saddened by her husband's departure, as Philip did not love her and only saw their union as a duty to produce an heir. She sent him countless letters, pleading for his return, but Philip did not come back to England until 1557. Mary was overjoyed by his return, thinking he had come back for her, but in reality, he had only come to request a large sum of money to continue financing his war against France. Completely in love, Mary relented and gave him everything he asked for. Once Philip got what he wanted, he left England again, this time for good. In 1558, England lost the city of Calais to the French, and the English people turned against Mary for having supported her husband. The loss of Calais was a huge embarrassment for the nation. On top of this, Mary fell into a deep depression. She believed that she was finally pregnant, convinced that she had conceived during her brief reunion with Philip, as she had missed her period and experienced all the symptoms of pregnancy. However, as the months passed and she did not give birth, it became clear that it was another false pregnancy, likely caused by fluid retention due to psychological stress. These false pregnancies, along with her husband's absence, severely affected the Queen's health. In October 1558, Mary began to suffer from severe, constant headaches and high fevers, feeling that her end was near. She did not want to leave the throne to her sister, Elizabeth, because she was Protestant. But her advisors urged her to recognize Elizabeth as her successor, as she was the best option. Despite everything, Elizabeth was still considered illegitimate, which left room for their cousin, Mary Stuart, to claim the English throne. Faced with these circumstances, Mary finally made a will, leaving everything to her sister Elizabeth. She died at the age of 42 on November 17, 1558, likely from ovarian cancer. Mary died as she had lived, surrounded by people, yet always alone, rejected by her father, her husband, and her people. She loved, but was never loved in return. Despite her deep desire to be a mother, that dream was never realized. Her final wish to be buried alongside her mother was also denied, and she lies in Westminster Abbey, next to her sister Elizabeth. Her reign remains overshadowed by the flames of her burnings.